Alrighty. Hello, everyone. We wrapped up chapter 8 last week in the Tanya, lessons in Tanya, in Likutei Amarim, which is part 1 of Likutei Amarim, which is basically the beginning of the book, but chapter 8. And we talked about how being deeply involved in Torah is good, oisek in Torah is good, but deeply involved oisek in non-Torah, such as science, not for the sake of heaven, seems bad. It's connected to the klipa still. In other words, it says here that the Rambam and the Ramban of blessed memory and their peers engaged in them, talking about in the sciences, since they were able to utilize this knowledge in the service of God and Torah. So there's being oisek in the Torah, and there's being oisek in the sciences. You don't want to just be osek in the Torah for frivolous reasons and things like that. Concerning frivolity, I'm talking about things that are not for the sake of heaven. Okay, let's move on to chapter 9. Moving along. So chapter 9, we're in Lessons in Tanya, Likutei Amarim, chapter 9. And this is Lessons in Tanya, so we're going to read about we're going to have some commentary, some elucidations by Rabbi Yosef Weinberg that we'll read. Chapter 9. In the previous chapters, the Alter Rebbe elaborated on the composition of the Jew's divine soul, with its 10 holy soul powers and 3 soul garments, and his animal soul. So the Jew's divine soul is called a nefesh elokis, but while the Alter Rebbe says it's the Jew's divine soul, it appears that it's kind of putting the cart before the horse. To me, it's it's a godly soul. And every Yisrael has the secondary soul, this nefesh elokis, and it is part of Hashem mamish. And it was written along hundreds of years ago when he could not interact with non-Jews in such a way. But it appears to us, it appears to me at least through the mechanics, that if a non-Jew as well is osek in the Torah, deeply involves himself in the Torah, he's starting to interact with the nefesh elokis as well. In the same manner as a Yisrael, but maybe not in the completeness when it comes to Achdus Hashem. But nonetheless, it definitely appears like it's the same type of soul. With its 10 holy soul powers, I'm assuming they're talking about the Sephirot, and 3 soul garments, thought, speech, and action, and his animal soul, Nefesh Behemoth, with its corresponding 10 powers and 3 garments, originating in Klipa. In the present chapter, the Alter Rebbe will discuss the battle fought within the Yisrael between these 2 souls. So we've talked about this already. The abode, Makom, the place, the abode of the animal soul, the Nefesh Behemoth, the Nefesh Bahamot, the Bahamit, is derived from Klipat Noga in every Yisrael. Notice here he does not talk about every non-Jew here because it doesn't derive in every non-Jew. The only one that it derives from in the non-Jew from Klipat Noga is called a Chassid Umot Ha'olam, the Hasidei Umot Ha'olam, the kind ones of the peoples of the world. They have an element of bittul to them, and therefore they receive a portion of the world to come as well. Now, this is not mentioned in the Tanya because when it was written, it was geared just for Yisrael. You're just for Jews. But the Alter Rebbe in other places throughout Hasidus talks about the Hasidei Moto Olam. So it's unfortunate that a lot of people get the impression that Chabad Hasidus is anti-non-Jew, but that's not true. There are selfish non-Jews that it talks about, but unfortunately, it just doesn't go into depth about the Tanya specifically doesn't go into depth about other certain types of non-Jews that are generally good. They have an element of bittul. They do true kindness and things like this. You have to look in other parts of Chabad Hasidus. Again, there's some of it's written by the Alter Rebbe who talks about it. So it's not like he wasn't aware of it at all. He was very much aware of it. He just did not put it in the Tanya. And
Do
so,
you think they existed during his time?
oh, definitely, 100%. The Chida, which I think was a little bit later, but the Chida came across such a person, and the Chida told him, this non-Jew, he not interrogated, but he asked him some deep questions, like what are your beliefs and things like this, because the non-Jew, I think, accosted him, Chida, and said, hey, I don't believe in idolatry, which was back then was a bit unique. And so the Chida was very interested in this non-Jew. So he asked him some questions such as what is his beliefs, and the non-Jew said he believes in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and that he does not worship idols. And I forget the other verbatim like details. But basically, the Chida told him to stay away from Shituf. I think he told him to keep the seven, to told him about the seven maybe, and told him to keep the seven, to stay away from Shituf, which if you're doing the seven and you're abstaining from Shituf, and what that formula is called Ger Toshav. It's called Ger Toshav. Now, I'm not saying that the Chida said, oh, this is a Ger Toshav, but if you follow the Chida, his writing there, because it's in Magal Tov is the name of the work of the Chida. It's actually his journal. He would travel all around Europe and the Mediterranean, basically, gathering tzedakah, gathering funds to help the impoverished of Yisrael that were in the land of Yisrael. He'd give money to like his yeshiva and things like this. And he came across this non-Jew in his travels, and he wrote it in his journal, and it's now called Magal Tov. I have the journal. It's in Yiddish, so I have a hard time reading it. But he came across this non-Jew, told him to I believe he told him to keep the seven, abstain from shituf, be careful not to do any kind of shituf, and check this out. He told him to say the Shema.
That's a good
point. So he told this non-Jew to say the Shema. And why is this important? Because there are people out there are even some rabbis that say, no, non-Jews shouldn't say the Shema. They do things for selfish motives and yada yada. You have to find these kinds of stories because they are exceptions to the rule, and the reason why a person needs to know them because you don't want to be unjust. And if you generalize people, that's going to breed injustice because there's always going to be somebody that breaks the mold. Just like this non-Jew that the Chida ran across. So that's kind of what I'm getting at here is that even though the Alter Rebbe doesn't talk about all non-Jews here, he doesn't talk about any non-Jews really, but in the Tanya, he's only talking about the Umoto Alam, which are the base, like bad type of non-Jews, so to speak. Even if they do kindness, they're doing things for selfish motives. However, the Tanya does not mention the Hasidei Umoto Alam. which is mentioned in other places by the Alter Rebbe and Hasidic works. But the Tanya wasn't meant to talk to those people. It wasn't meant for non-Jews. Matter of fact, probably the reason why he didn't was because he would get thrown in jail or worse in the country that he lived in. So they had to be very careful. Jews just about always had to be careful about what they did and said in their nations that they lived in. We live in a slightly different time now, though, where you can speak openly. So, and I hope it gets out more, because speaking openly about this is a good thing. Nobody, this is what we've been needing to hear, that there are true, kind people from the peoples of the world. And if you want to know more about that, I've recorded videos of all of us talking about that based on, what was that, chapter 1 and 2, which I think is like video 14 and 15 of the series. Okay. I.e., so the abode of the Nefesh Behemoth derived from that Klipat Noga. All of Yisrael derived from Klipat Noga. It's a klipa, it's a shell, a shimmering shell, an illuminated shell that contains a little bit of goodness in it. Hasidei Umot Olam, also their Nefesh Behemoth, their animal soul, derives from that Klipat Noga as well. I.e., the place where the animal soul, Nefesh Behemoth, resides is most manifest, is in the heart. Or as mentioned in previous chapters, the Nefesh Behemoth is predominantly emotional, and the heart is the seat of emotion. Now, this makes a lot of sense because Hasidei Umot Olam do not have the Torah. They are in the peoples of the world still. The peoples of the world do not have Torah, at least not directly. It's concealed from them. Ha'olam can also be understood to be read as Helem. This is mentioned in Rashi in Shmos 3:15. Don't read Ha'olam, but read Helem. What's Helem? Concealment. So the people of the concealment, the people of the world, the people of the concealment. So the Hasidei Umot Olam are very shaykh, very connected to their emotional attributes. Why are they called Hasidei? Because they are connected to the emotion of Chesed. And Chesed encompasses all worlds. It's from the long pillar in Hasidic speak. More specifically, the abode of the animal soul is in the left ventricle. Okay, wow, we're getting detailed here. As it is filled with blood, and it is written, for the blood is in the soul, Nefesh, indicating that the soul resides in that ventricle filled with blood, the left ventricle. Because the animal soul resides in the heart, therefore all lusts and boasting and anger and similar passions are in the heart. And from the heart, they spread throughout the entire body, rising also to the brain and the head, to think and meditate about them and to become cunning with them. So, yes.
I was going to say that footnote 2 is very interesting.
Okay, footnote 2. Okay, note the difference in expression. The emotions merely spread to all the other organs, but rise to the brain. When emotion is assimilated into the intellect, it indeed rises and is elevated, even in the case of the animal soul, where the intellect is merely the tool of emotion. So in other words, every animal body and soul has a brain. They have the seichel, they have the intellect. It's just subservient to their emotional traits. I'm hungry. I'm hungry. Let's go find food. How can I figure out using my seichel how to find food? It's not necessarily for the sake of heaven. It's for the sake of their own self and the sake of the world, so to speak.
Yeah, it says right here in the Schulstein one, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. excuse me, it says about the animal soul, not the people are not because they're a fulfillment of the desire, but because they are an assertion of the selfhood, pitting one's ego against another. In a sense, both are short of idolatry and self-worship.
Right. Interesting. For the essential nature of intellect is more refined than that of emotion. With regard to the blood mentioned presently, the expression rises is again used specifically in connection with the brain. The blood, too, is elevated and refined upon ascending to the brain. That's very interesting. And Russell, in one of our classes that we did around, it might have been around Pesach, but we did Char Hag HaMatzot, I believe, the gate of the holiday of Matzah.
Mhm.
And it talks about Hasidei Motalam in there and how that's kind of like the lowest form of trying to think about Hashem. They're seeing kind of like through that noga, that fog, that illuminated husk, and they're trying to figure out their emotions intellectually. Like, why do I feel this way? Why are they? I would say emotionally or intellectually, they're thinking about the emotional attribute of Chesed. Why would somebody do this for me? Why would I do this for them? Thinking of Hesed, and they connect with Hesed. They're trying to be kind people, things like this. And they think about the world that way. So from their own perspective, they're trying to think about God and Hashem. And I say they, but this is a walk that I've had throughout my life. Growing up a Catholic in the church, you're trying to figure things out, right? And you have a ton of Hesed bouncing back and forth everywhere. And you're trying to figure all that out. And it's the Hesed that kind of draws you in, that kind of keeps you motivated. And I think this is what it's kind of referring to, is like all that Hesed is going everywhere in your emotional attributes. It's connecting with you and it's stirring you. And then it goes up into your brain. It rises into your brain and you start to think about all those things. So like for me personally, it was, well, I wanted to know about Jesus and things like this. I wanted to know all these different things. I wanted to know theologically what it all meant, right? So you have an emotional pull for whatever reason of Hesed, and because it's from the long pillar and it encompasses all things, it can affect everyone. And it goes up into the brain. You start to think about it like, well, okay, I want to do this. I want to, what's this mean about Jesus or whatever? That's from my perspective, because that was my background, right? And as you progress, though, you're going to get into Torah eventually. And I think that's, like I said earlier, that's like the base level is Hasidei Motolam when it comes to thinking about Hashem, thinking about it. And
yeah, that's what you do when you come up there. Then we start wondering, how did we deserve, to come out of this and to start and to connect with Hashem through His Torah and all this stuff. And so we start wondering about that kindness of Hashem instead of searching for kindness within ourselves.
yeah,
But in a sense, it was like that, because we like, what did we do?
right.
Where that we could share in this wisdom and this understanding, of the Torah and what it, and so you can see what you're talking about is this elevation of thinking of Hesed within our journey, and that's a crazy point to
100%.
start thinking about. Yeah.
That's why I focus so much on non-Jews and Hasidei Motolam. They're still in the klipa. They're still in the concealment, so to speak. They're still in the concealment. And how do they break through that shell of concealment? It's the Hesed. It's that piercing of Hesed. And I don't want to talk about it too much because this is not class on Christianity, but in Christianity, it's always like, why would Jesus die for me and all this stuff, right? Well, what that does is it breaks through the klipa, it uses chesed to draw people in out of their concealment, right? And what happens is they start to attach the Torah, and then they start to learn about shituf and all this stuff. And what it does is it drags people out of their concealment. But the tools have to be what is currently in their concealment. And what tools are in their concealment? It is, oh, did I just go too far? It is these emotions. I think he even called them tools, didn't he?
Go back.
Did he call them tools, or maybe it was in the footnote?
It was in the
It
footnote.
was in the footnote.
Yeah, so yeah, right here. So my point is, how do you break somebody out of concealment? You have to inject truth, or you have to inject with things that are inside the concealment. You have to use the tools that are inside the concealment. And what are those tools? They're emotional traits. They're, things like sacrifice and things like this. And so this connects with anybody who's in that kind of concealment. That's why it's Chesed that has to do it. I think maybe fear could do it as well, but Chesed definitely, because, well, again, the fear, there's God-fears in the Tanakh, right? There's something called God-fears. Again, but what is that? That's the trait of Gevura. That's from the left side. But then there's also this right side, this trait of Chesed, which is all encompassing. It encompasses any world. And why? Because Chesed creates worlds. You have to have Chesed in order to create a world. And so that's like the mechanics of the Umot Ha'olam and the Hasidei Umot Ha'olam. You have to, how do you break them out? In my opinion, it's by using those very mechanics that they have, either fear or Chesed, which is the root of the two roots of the emotional traits, in my opinion. Or I think it's all the Alter Rebbe's opinion. I think we talked about that back in Sharha Yehud V'Amunah.
Footnote 3, the Rebbe goes on to explain a little bit more.
Oh, let's read that. The Rebbe explains that the specific mention of the brain, aside from its inclusion with the other organs, parallels the statement further that the divine soul's abode is in the brain and the heart. Oh my goodness, I didn't know that. I knew it was in the brain, but I think it, like, if I remember correctly, it kind of like slightly overlaps the heart a little bit.
Well, in the spirit, the heart would be Tiferet.
Oh, really?
It would be, but there even in
we're talking about the left ventricle.
Well, it's interesting that he's breaking down the organ of the heart like that.
Yeah.
Say, but there's always that connection between the heart and the brain. Between Tiferet and Keter, or the upper mido Sphero.
It could be that they're somehow overlapping too. Like maybe Tiferet is the heart, like Teresa said, but that left chamber is somehow containing is it just Hesed, or is it the whole soul? The left ventricle. Okay, he's saying the Nefesh Behemoth is in that left ventricle.
Okay, so that's it's within the left side, which is the side of Gevurah, and maybe he's just designating that portion of the heart. And
aren't the Sephirot like one, they're like in each other or some such? Aren't there like
at a particular level, at the level of Atzilut, they're all contained within themselves.
Yeah, so maybe. Alrighty, so that's good to know.
Would that be what they're talking about here? The primal impulse is uniform instinct and one-dimensional,
Oh, maybe. I don't know. I haven't read that yet.
It might be.
Yeah,
It might
maybe.
be the comments.
James, have you checked to see if anyone else is trying to come in?
I have periodically, and I haven't seen anybody.
It's
I'm
from the
sorry.
heart that is
Yeah, it
full
is
of blood.
9:30.
The person's identity as a physical being. Okay, here it's talking about in Steinsaltz, it says constantly found. Let me see if it. But when the manifestations are traced to their source, it is consistently found to be the base of instincts of man. The left ventricle in the heart that is full of blood, the person's identity as a physical being is full of blood, the person's a physical being. For in the animal soul, the blood is the soul. Deuteronomy 12:23. Life is for the sake of life rather than an instrument for a higher purpose. The blood is the soul, and the soul is the blood. The self is life, and the life is self. The self is the
Epicenter.
okay, yeah. Well, they split it on you and
Yeah,
mess
I
you up.
know. Yeah, I know.
Of the being, the
I just tell
epicenter
you
of the being
Mhm.
derives from it, and from and all of it reverts to.
Interesting.
Oh yeah, and he goes, oh man, it just.
What is that from, Russell?
This is from opening the Tanya, Rabbi Steinsaltz, his commentary on it.
Mhm.
And it goes, this self saturated being is not a holy thing. The experience of holiness is by the definition separate from the experience of selfhood,
Mm.
where there is ego. There cannot be holiness. Holiness can only reside where there is a surrender of the I, where the self is nullified before the supernal source. This is really touching on a lot of what, the Baal HaShalam's ladder. I mean, that idea that I just read it talks about the ego and subduing the ego. It's really interesting. I didn't think that he was, he could have been. I don't know where. Either they're both drawing this idea and this information from the same source, or the Baal HaShalam was using the Tanya. But I didn't think that he was Ashkenazi, so he may have been.
Interesting. Oh, that's good to know.
That's very interesting, powerful stuff.
It's like the deeper it goes, it's like they all seem to kind of agree. Like
when you get down to the source, there's no. I don't think there's any real difference in their teaching.
Right. It's like they're
because
just the way they express it, but other than that,
Russell, if you go on to that next paragraph, it really explains the animal soul in different than I'd seen it.
Thus, the quality and sophistication of the animal soul is irrelevant to its holiness. A person can be small by criteria of his animal soul, yet be a holy person, or he might be a great in human animal terms, yet not be holy at all. Nevertheless, the animal soul might determine the character of the holiness that is present in the person. The animal soul embodies the basic structure of the human personality, the I that permeates all of the person's facilities and garments. Thus, the person's holiness, although not self-deriving from the animal soul, assumes the scope and character of the animal soul. It's just incredible about ourselves. You know, if we can understand ourselves within the mind of these sages and what they were saying in comparison with the animal soul and the higher soul, this consciousness and this understanding is what elevates us if we're allowed to learn it.
Right. And it appears like everything that I've seen, anyone is allowed to, but if you're an idolater, you're going to be worthy of death for it. And so you better not be an idolater.
But yeah, that's yeah. But we have to have a consciousness of that requirement and what that is. I think
In
a
order
lot
to
of
understand it is what you're saying.
yeah, I think a lot of people believe that they're not idolaters. They will argue with you all day long.
Yeah.
Even the Hindus or Christians or any of this, they will argue with the fact. But so we have to learn what that is. And I think once we break that klippa within our intellect, that, and it may be something what this is alluding to ultimately, is that once we break that in our intellect, then we can start to glean things of holiness and understand them. And then once we understand them, we could actually start to implement them.
Excellent. I agree. That's very good.
There's just one other thing here I'd like to just add, please.
Okay.
It's the very last line of what Russell was just reading. But in and of itself, the animal soul is the antithesis of holiness, embodying the concept that the blood is the soul, that the center of its existence is in the body itself.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, it only thinks about the body.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just operating. It's just a function. It's a machine.
Right.
It doesn't have a will. It's only what pleases the body, and the soul is designating that function is by this is what pleases me.
Well, that is the will, right? That's like the Citra Achra will or something. Right.
Correct. If that's what your intellect allows to be in control,
right.
It's going to teach the machine, the animal soul, right. what to do.
Or the animal soul is going to teach the brain, or it's the will of the Citra Achra animal soul, right? If you don't let if you don't let something higher override the will.
Right, because I mean, even it's got to be. You have, and the only thing that's higher is the Torah.
That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, it's the standard. It's the standard in which to function by. If we understand there's a Citra Achra and there's an evil inclination and there's then we have to know. Well, then what's the other side? The side of holiness is the Torah. Right. Once we have that, then we can take the machine, the animal soul, and tell it how to run.
Very good. Oh man, very good. Yeah, it's amazing that people don't want us to do that.
I can't believe that. Yeah. It's like, and then they complain about us being bad.
Yeah, right.
It's like I was talking with Rabbi Shepherd this morning, and I told him, I said, I know we're a handful, but I appreciate what he's doing and getting out there to the nations, because we don't have this sophistication and understanding that what we need to make the machine, our animal soul, run in the context of holiness, we're still running it off of influenced by the Sitra Achra, and because that's how we've trained our nefesh about I and about ego,
Right.
and so once it has something else to compare it to, like, oh, I don't want myself to do that. That's selfish of me. But the only reason I know that is because of the context of holiness. Somewhere in the Torah, we understood about selflessness.
Right. Excellent. Right. It's derived from Torah somewhere, huh?
Somewhere in there, I guarantee you, it will. If not, we'd never understand any of this. And those that are totally void of Torah, those nations and those peoples they're functioning off of pure. The machine is running off of
selfish motives.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay. Because the animal soul resides in the heart, therefore all lusts and boasting and anger, similar passions are in the heart. And from the heart they spread throughout the entire body, rising also to the brain and the head, to think and meditate about them and to become cunning in them, so that thinking and meditating, that happens with Hasidei Motolam as well.
Mm-hmm.
Just as the blood has its source in the heart, and from the heart it circulates into every organ, rising also to the brain and the head. Similarly, the soul, nefesh, clothed in the blood, abides in the heart and spreads out from there to pervade one's entire body. Thus, in the case of the animal soul, the nefesh behemoth, the brain, the intellectual faculties too, instead of motivating the heart and guiding it, merely reacts to it and serves only as a clever tool for realizing the passions of the heart, for making the passions of the heart real. Eat food, for instance. I'm hungry, so the brain is going to try and figure out how to satiate that emotional attribute. So that person then, if it's not for the sake of heaven to eat or whatever, it's only going to be for the sake of something else. But the abode of the divine soul, the nefesh Elokis, is in the brain, is in the brains that are in the head. Notice how he says brains there. In the brain, in the mohin.
Hokmah Keter Hokmah Bina is what I think he has to be driving to left side and right side of the brain.
Yeah. I said brains here, but it should have, the brains that are in the head. I think he's talking about something a little bit deeper here than just your brain, but we'll see here. And from there, it extends to all the limbs. The divine soul is essentially intellective, and the brain is the seat of intellect. The divine soul resides also in the heart, in the right ventricle, where there is no blood. Oh boy. As it is written, the heart of the wise man, i.e., the divine soul, in contrast with the animal soul, specifically the evil inclination, the Yetzer Hara, which is described as an old fool, is on his right. The heart of the wise man is on his right.
At the side of Hesed.
Yeah.
So it would be cool to see how the heart, because what he's talking about is how the heart actually pumps blood through it, and so it empties the right and fills into the left.
Right.
I'm assuming that.
Yeah, and I don't even know which reference he's talking about. He's talking about if you're looking at it from the front, or are you looking at it from the person's vantage point?
Are you looking at it like the spheroid structure from the back?
Yeah, right. So I don't know which way is he. That's just my ignorance, though. And he's talking about ventricles. You have ventricles, and you have aortas. Your right ventricles and your aorta, your aortas. So you have 4 chambers in your heart, right?
Right.
Uh,
Two in the bottom and 2 upper ventricles and 2 lower ones.
yeah.
Right and left.
The heart of the wise man, i.e., the divine soul. Okay, the heart of the wise man is on his right. We thus see that the divine soul resides not only in the brain, but in the right ventricle of the heart as well. As he did when speaking of the animal soul, the Alter Rebbe again singles out the heart from among all the other organs, having said that the divine soul extends to all the organs. He mentions the heart specifically and also in the heart. For unlike the other organs in which merely the extension of the divine soul is manifest, in the heart, the divine soul itself, i.e., its emotional faculties, is revealed. The Alter Rebbe now goes on to explain this point. Okay, I'm not sure I fully understand that. We'll see here. This revelation in the heart of the divine soul resides in the brain is man's fiery love toward God. Okay. Interesting.
The word fiery is interesting. That has to have a meaning.
Yeah. It's the emotional, it's the fire.
Passion.
The you know how the 4 elements.
Uh-huh.
So this revelation in the heart of the divine soul residing in the brain is man's fiery love towards God. So it's when the Nefesh Elokit that resides in the brain has a revelation in the heart, which flares up in the heart of discerning men who utilize their power of Chokhmah. So that would be, so this is what I'm getting right here. So the non-Jewish Hasidic portion of me, right? My path, I would call this is Christianity. This is coming out of Christianity. In other words, you have all these like emotional things that are going on in Christianity that arises up in you, and then you start to interact with Torah down here. And so this is like the way that non-Jews find their way to Torah. And there's no other way to explain it really, because it's not like Jews are going out and missionizing people. A majority of non-Jews who are involved in Torah today, they're doing it because whatever religion that they were in is somehow connected to Torah, or they're questioning so much that they go into the bookstores and they find the Torah. You know, it's in other words, what I'm saying is it's the non-Jews imperative. It's their actions, right? And where do those thoughts and ideas come from for the non-Jew to seek out the Torah? They don't even know it's the Torah, right? But they seek it out. And this to me explains a lot of what is going on. It's an emotional attribute. Every human being has a nefesh behemoth and can get emotional about this stuff. Let's see here. Which flares up in the heart of discerning men. So men that are using their intellect. So from coming from a Christian perspective, this would be the holy head of Esav. It's the intellect of Esav coming back saying, hey, I remember there's some truth I need to be thinking about. There's something I need to be doing with my brain.
Rather than just indulging itself.
Exactly. Yeah, right. Like something is out there and I need to get it, basically. Which flares up in the heart of discerning men. I'm trying to find the Hebrew of in the heart from seichlim of the intellect of the intellectuals, the intellects, who utilize their power of chokhmah, who understand and reflect with their faculty of bina, understanding, by which they understand the matter in all its details and ramifications, with the knowledge of their brain, i.e., with their faculty of da'at, knowledge, by which they immerse themselves and sensitize themselves in that which they understand. Thus, the love flares up in the hearts of those who utilize all three faculties of Chokhmah, Bina, and Da'at. So here's why people are still in Christianity. And Russ, you see this, and well, maybe Teresa and Dixie as well. But like, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink, type thing. And every single time we talk to people, for us, because of our background, we know about Christianity, so we can do like counter missionary things and that. If people that we are talking to are unwilling to engage their intellect and they let their emotions override their intellect, this is what he's talking about. Well, this is not exactly what he's talking about, but this is the mechanics of what he's talking about. This is what the Alter Rebbe is talking about here, is why we cannot engage and bring certain people out of Christianity, because they do not want to engage their intellectual faculties. In other words, there's critical thinking. A lot of people, you hear a lot of people say, oh, they just lack common sense. This is what common sense, the Iker term in our vernacular, in the non-Jewish vernacular, they just need some common sense. This is what it is right here. They're not willing to engage their intellectual three faculties of Chokhmah, Bina, and Da'at. They're not critical thinkers.
But it's
I'm sorry?
all emotion.
Yeah, exactly. They're emotional. That's just the way it's been, and that's just the way it is, blah, blah, blah. And they'll go into start talking about whatever, some kind of religious thing that is completely an axiom for them. Like they just have this whatever. They're not willing to engage their intellectual attributes. So with the knowledge of their brain on matters that arouse this love, i.e. the contemplation of God's greatness, as the Alter Rebbe will soon conclude. So he's talking about Yisrael primarily here. People that might already be initiated into Torah, at least to some extent, who are interacting with the Nefesh Elokis. But it appears to me that there's a similar mechanic that non-Jews do as well. It's just to a much lesser degree, because they don't have easy access to Torah. But God willing, eventually they get there. As explained in the 3rd chapter, understanding the greatness of God leads one to love him. This love, then, is one example of the divine souls reaching from the brain into the heart. Similarly, another deeper way in which the heart's emotion gives expression to the presence of the divine soul in the brain, the gladness of the heart at apprehending the beauty of God and the majesty of his glory. The gladness that is aroused when the divine soul's intellect, which the Alter Rebbe, borrowing a phrase from Ecclesiastes, describes as the wise man's eyes are in his head, meaning in the brain, harboring his wisdom and understanding. With these eyes, i.e., intellectual faculties, gaze intently at the glory of the King and the beauty of his unfathomable, infinite, and boundless greatness. Then the heart rejoices and is glad, as explained elsewhere. So you're deeply immersing yourself in Torah study, and you're like, wow, finally, I found it. Gazing with the mind's eye, meaning that one not only understands the greatness of God, but also perceives it, as though seeing it with his very eyes. Such perception arouses great joy in one's heart. And this joy, like the love spoken of earlier, is a direct result and a manifestation of the intellect of the divine soul residing in the brain. Similarly, the other holy emotions in the heart, too, such as fear of God and the like, originate from the Chabad, wisdom, understanding, knowledge in the brains. The Alter Rebbe has thus established that each of these two souls has its own separate abode and way of functioning, lest we erroneously conclude that each soul goes about its own affairs, not interfering or concerning itself with those of the other. The Alter Rebbe continues, it is written, however, one nation shall prevail over the other nation. Right. Yaakov and Esav. Wow. See, when you're talking about the intellect in non-Jews, it seems to always go back to Esav, in my opinion. Like, well, you mean, don't get me wrong, it goes back further, but Esav is a really good example. Let me put it that way. The verse refers to Yaakov and Esav in terms of a Jew's spiritual life. It is understood as an allusion to the divine soul, the nefesh Elokit, and the animal soul, nefesh behemoth, respectively, who are constantly warring with each other. So, kind of like in my view, here in the world of Asiya and Malchus, there is a difference between Yisrael and a non-Yisrael and the way we interact with one another. But we also have to be growing. We have to be growing. And I believe that when a non-Jew is interacting with Torah as well, this dichotomy is taking place as well. So in the world of Asiya and the world of Malchus, it very much seems like a lot of non-Jews, and particularly in our Western culture, are playing this kind of Esav holy head role when we come to Torah. But the truth is, when we're interacting with Torah, we're taking on this aspect of Yaakov as well. We have our own lives to live. We as individuals are wrestling with how to try and live a godly life while living in our own animal soul. So I see that a lot of times with non-Jews that are new to Torah or some such, like they still have this, they're not yet grasping onto the Yaakov part. They're still not grasping onto the Nefesh Elokis part. They're afraid to do it because the religions that they come in before was saying, well, that's too high, that's too holy. So a lot of non-Jews, what they do is they trade the worship of one Jew for the worship of like 6 million Jews. And what it appears to me is that you have to break from that mindset completely. And now you have to realize that you're starting to study Torah, you're taking on aspects of that Nefesh Elokis, and therefore you need to start beruring, modifying, elevating the things in your life. You're rectifying and extracting holiness and goodness from the things that are in your life. because I hate to say it, but the Jewish community is probably not going to be there for you. It's just the way it is right now. Until the nations are not putting Yisrael under so much duress. So we have to do our part, so to speak. And the only way to do our part, though, is to have this interaction within ourselves as well. You can't have a severance between the Jewish community and then expect things to change. It's not. You're going to have to do this. For the body is called a small city. Wow. The two souls in relation to one's body are just as two kings who wage war over a city, which each wishes to capture and dominate even against its will, and to rule with the consent of the populace. That is to say, each king wishes to direct its inhabitants according to his will, so that they obey him and all that he decrees upon them. So you have your own little goyim inside you. So too do the two souls, the divine soul and the vitalizing animal soul, which originates from Klipa. Oh, interesting. He in the Hebrew they call them different. There's the Nefesh Elokis, the godly soul, but this one's called the living soul, or the vitalizing soul, which so I'm assuming he's referring to the Nefesh Behemoth here, the animal soul, from Klipa, and is therefore the very antithesis of the divine soul. Wage war against each other over the body and all its organs. This is important, all its organs, because we studied in chapter 4 or 5, that the organs, there's 613 organs that the king has, and Yisrael has all 613 organs that are connected to mitzvahs. The body being an analogous to this, I hope I pronounced that right. The body being analogous to the city and the organs to its inhabitants. Here too, each soul wishes to direct the city's inhabitants according to its will, as follows. The divine soul's will and desires that she alone rule over the person and direct him. It's interesting, it said she here. So that all the organs be subject to her discipline, following and obeying her dictates, and furthermore, that they surrender themselves completely to her. So it's calling the godly soul here her. That's very interesting. I.e., that they not only obey her, but also surrender their will to her. And she desires further still that all the organs become a chariot for her. So why is this important for the non-Jew? Because that Nefesh Elokis wants to interact with all the mitzvahs eventually, wants to all interact with all the organs. So I don't know if destiny is the proper word, but that's what's going to happen. That's what the will
James,
is.
may I intersect something from the Shelstein's?
Yeah, sure.
Shelstein salt or whatever, sorry. This is on the two souls that you're at now.
Yeah.
The author of the Tanya borrows the metaphor from the Tanakh. The aim of these warring kings is not merely to physically occupy a place, but to rule over it and influence it, to mold it and remake it to reflect their will. The body and all its organs and limbs, including the heart and the brain, are neutral ground. Body and soul are not the conflicting representations of good and evil, holiness and purity. The body in and of itself is not an expression of evil. Rather, the physical body is an instrument that might serve either the impure forces of the Klipa or the holy forces of the divine. The battle between the two souls is therefore over the body, which force should it serve, and for what purpose should it serve? The animal soul, which sees the body not as an instrument, but as an end in itself. Should the instrument then be recast as the objective and thus become the expression of the klipa? Or should it serve the divine soul, which sees it as an instrument through which it can achieve a higher degree of achievement to Hashem than possible on its own?
That's interesting. So they need each other.
Yeah.
The divine soul desires that the organs not only surrender their will to it, implying that they do indeed have a will of their own, though it is surrendered to the soul, but rather it desires also that they have no will other than its own, similar to a chariot, which has no independent will, but is merely an instrument of its driver.
That's exactly what I was talking about with the animal soul. Being a machine, being like that chariot.
Right. Moreover, the divine soul desires that the organs be also a garment, an instrument of expression for her 10 faculties and 3 garments of thought, speech, and action mentioned above, all of which should clothe the limbs of the body, and the entire body should be permeated with them alone. The body being harnessed in service of the divine soul might not preclude its serving the animal soul too on occasion. The bodies being harnessed in service of the divine soul might not preclude its serving the animal soul. What? So too, soul too on occasion. The Alter Rebbe therefore adds the phrase, the entire body should be permeated by the divine soul alone. Oh, emphasizing the divine soul's desire to have exclusive use of the body as an instrument of expression, leaving no place for the faculties and garments of the animal soul. Oh, wow. A czar, no alien would then, so a stranger, no alien or strange alien would then so much as pass through the organs, God forbid, i.e. the animal soul would exert no influence whatsoever on the body. The above forms a general description of the divine soul's desire to pervade the whole body. The Alter Rebbe now turns to specifics. Which organs would give expression to each particular faculty or garment of the divine soul? That is to say, oh, here we go, the different brains. This is to say specifically the 3 brains, the 3 sections of the brain, which correspond to the 3 intellectual faculties, Chokhmah, Bina, Dat, would be permeated with the Chabad of the divine soul, namely in discerning God and understanding Him, i.e., applying the faculties of Chokhmah and Bina to the understanding of godliness by pondering His unfathomable, and infinite greatness with these 2 faculties. Through applying to this meditation the faculty of Da'at, knowledge, as well, through immersing oneself in the subject of God's greatness with the depth typical of Da'at, so that one not only understands this greatness, but actually feels it. They, i.e. his aforementioned faculties of Chokhmah and Bina, engage in pondering God's greatness, will give birth to an awe of God in his mind and dread of God in his heart. Oh my. So we talked about this before. The author Rebbe talks to us about this before. There's a difference between an awe and a dread.
Yeah, look at the footnote.
Oh, look at you, Teresa. For the difference between awe and dread and their relationship to the mind and heart, respectively. See chapter 3, note 6. Very good. So yeah, it wasn't one like intellect. Did they both stem from Gavura or some such? But one is an intellectualized form of fear, and the other one is more of an emotional. So I'm going to go out on a limb here. The awe of God in his mind. That would be like going to what? Like the Grand Canyon or something like that. And then just thinking about Hashem and like just being in awe of Hashem or some such. And the dread of God in his heart would be like an emotional attribute. Like you really messed up. Or if I don't do this, it's just going to come down on me type thing. Would that be? I don't know.
James, I think you're right, because it says here, there's two types of fear mentioned here.
Yeah.
The first is yira, the sense of inadequacy generated in the mind when it is aware of infinity, greater presence than itself. While the second is pahad, the corresponding emotion in the heart, which is different from the more theatrical sense of awe. So like the Grand Canyon you're talking about, that would be the first one, I believe.
Yeah.
It's the greater. And then the pahad would be the corresponding emotion of the heart, which is different and has a different sense of awe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if I don't work hard, I'm going to starve, like, or something.
Well, it says here, namely, the wisdom of God and his understanding by contemplating his greatness, which is infinite, beyond comprehension, generate through them by means of the faculty of knowledge. Awe of God is his brain, and fear of God is his heart, and love of God is like a burning fire in his heart, like the sparks of the flame.
Interesting. Very good, because that's what we read. Oh, here we go. Here we go. Dixie, we're here. There will also be born of this contemplation a love of God, burning in his heart like a flame, like a fire. There you go.
Yeah. Yep, you got it.
His soul will thirst and pine with desire and longing to cleave to the blessed Ein Sof with all his heart, soul, and might. As it is written, and you shall love God your Lord with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your might. And to see, this is what I think draws a lot of non-Jews to Torah. It's not the same, it may be depth at first as Yisrael, because Yisrael was probably born into the culture of Torah, and that's probably Hashem. Well, for the non-Jew, I think it's a lot more concealed.
And James, listen to this.
Yeah.
It says heart, soul, and might is references to the second verse of the Shema. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. Deuteronomy 6:5. It means both chambers of the heart. The heart should be driven to attach itself to Hashem with the very same forces of longing and desire with which it is drawn to the klipa. With all your soul means that one's love of God Dixie can't say it tonight. Permeates all attributes of the soul, the three conjugative faculties and 7 emotive traits, as well as the 3 garments, thought, speech, and action. With all your might is interpreted with the connotation of ma'od as meaning more, or more specifically to go beyond. The person loves Hashem to the extent that he's even willing to give up his very existence. It is the devotion that is beyond all rational thought that transcends the soul's conjugative faculties of wisdom, understanding, and and knowledge. The Da'at, Bina, come on, Dixie. Kokma, Da'at, and Bina. I don't know, Russell, you guys help me out here. My mind's blank tonight. But it's,
Chochmah, Bina, and Dot.
yeah, yeah.
Very good.
Wisdom, and knowledge.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Dixie.
Teresa found this note here. I'm gonna try to read
From
it.
chapter 3, note 6.
You know, this is back in chapter 3
Oh,
on
that.
note 6.
Okay.
Let's see if I can read it here. Yira means an awe, which is felt from the most part intellectually, or the most part intellectually. Pachad denotes a dread which is felt emotionally in one's heart. This is why at the beginning of the chapter, where the emotions are enumerated and explained in a general way, Pachad precedes Yira. For Pachad, the feeling of dread in one's heart is a truer emotion than the intellectual Yira. Here, however, when dealing with the emotions as they are born from the intellect, Yira precedes Pachad. For only after the emotions is free, the emotions is first formed in the mind, at this at which stage it is Yira, does it then descend to the heart of Pachad? So that's just kind of gives a little background from that.
So it goes from Yira to Pachad, not the other way around?
That's what it says. It's derived in the intellect first. You have to think about what's making you your dread, what you're dreading before you have, but the dread comes from the heart. That's the way.
Oh. Yeah, that does make sense. So it's
Would
talking
you-
about, it's fear of God. It's not just fear. It's fear of God. It's fear of Hashem, or fear of God.
It's that dread. It's that thing where you did something, and then your mind, then it goes back up. Once the fear, the dread is in place, then then it goes back to its source in Yira, to where, like, how am I going to fix this within myself that I did? How am I going to be atoned for this?
Right.
And then we're sitting there with ourselves, and that's when we come to the point of repentance.
Right.
Once it goes through this cycle from the intellect to the heart, back to the intellect, and then then that's, I feel like it leads us into repentance.
Wow. Yeah, I would think so. Very good. It's like a gate of Teshuvah or something. That's very good. Very insightful. Thank you, Russell. Yeah, that is good. Yeah, so it's not just fear, it's fear of God. With all your heart means that the heart is filled with the love of God. With all your soul implies that the love spills over beyond the heart to affect all the organs of the body. The feet, for example, will move with alacrity to do a mitzvah. With all your might means loving God to the point where one will sacrifice his life for him. So it's basically a paraphrase of what Dixie was quoting as well. This love will rise from the depths of the heart, that is, from the right ventricle, the seat of the divine soul's emotional faculties. So this is, I am going to forget this for next week, probably. But from the depths of the heart, that is from the right ventricle, the seat of the divine soul's emotional faculties, as mentioned above. So they do. It seems to me like they somehow like overlap or something. They do something at first initially, and then they spread to the rest throughout the heart, through all the pumping of the blood. The kind of love that is the divine soul desires. Wait, the kind of love that the divine soul desires entails that the heart be inlaid with love from within. Oh my goodness, what does that mean? Song of
James,
Songs.
can I say something?
No, I don't think so, Mercy. I'm sorry. I'm kidding. Please go ahead.
Well, I was just thinking when it was talking about, and sorry I came late, by the way. I
That's all
didn't
right.
realize
We
what
were
time it was.
wondering. We were getting a little.
But anyways, when it starts talking about the heart this way, I'm thinking about when the okay, for lack of a better word, phylactery is tied on the arm, right? It has connection to the heart.
Oh, right. Yeah, it's opposite the. It's right by the heart. It points toward the heart. If
Right.
yeah,
So
yeah.
when it's tied on in the shape of the sheen, and
Mhm.
then there's this other aspect of when we have heart issues, it's always starts on the left side. The heart, it's always it'll say left anterior or it's always the left side of the heart that seems to have the biggest trouble of the human heart
Yeah, like most heart attacks occur over
on the
there, doesn't
left.
it? Yeah, very
Mhm.
interesting.
Yeah, or descending left, something, something. Yeah, it's very interesting. So, and why this says the right,
Hmm.
it's making me wonder, there must be something very important to the right.
Right.
Mm.
That's very good. That's very insightful.
I'm trying to scroll down your page on my computer, but I
Oh, yeah, yeah. I'll just mess with you there.
can't.
That's funny. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, guys. Um, yeah, I don't know what this means. The kind of love that this divine soul desires entails that the heart be inlaid with love from within. And furthermore, not only would the love be, as it were, on the surface of the heart, but the heart would also be full with the love occupying its entire space, as it were. And furthermore, it would be indeed filled to overflowing, i.e., the love would overflow into the left part of the heart to affect the emotional faculties of the animal soul which reside there, as the Alter Rebbe continues. Oh, so it's going to start affecting and like overruling the emotional, the nefesh behemoths, the animal soul. That's pretty cool. In other words, you're going to be able to change I think it's what it's saying. You're going to be able to change the desires of your heart, the desires of your nefesh behemoths. The love would thus inundate the left part of the heart as well to crush the Sitra Achra. Wow. Specifically, the element of evil water in it, in the animal soul, meaning the lust emanating from Klipat Noga. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. As mentioned in chapter 1, the animal soul's element of water gives rise to lust for physical pleasures derived from Klipat Noga. Because things that are permissible, well, no, that wouldn't make sense because there are things that people could seek out that were not permissible. Now, the animal soul's spirit of lust is in the klipa, the counterpart of the design. Now, the animal soul's spirit of lust is the klipa counterpart of the divine soul's spirit of love for God. Thus, the divine soul's intense love of God has the power to crush the animal soul's lust for physical pleasures. Wow, that's pretty powerful.
Well, that's very interesting because we were just mentioning the left side, and now we can see why the left side becomes injured. We can see now why the left side of the heart becomes injured.
Wow.
That's interesting.
As it says, it talks about here, it says, when a person attains the level of love and delights, he no longer needs to force himself to abandon worldly matters and desires, for he no longer desires them. This is the transmission from the stage of subduing to that of transforming, from the stage where he has to suppress the
Oh,
animal
wow.
soul to that where the animal soul itself desires holiness.
Wow, 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 wow. This is amazing. Is the Alter Rebbe basically teaching us how to be like a tzaddik? Do you remember chapter 1
Well,
and
this is the whole
2?
mechanism.
Chapter 1 and 2, he's talking about the Benoni and the different types of Tzaddikim and Roshaim and things like this. Didn't you just describe there, Russ? Basically, like, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's easy, but how to become a tzaddik. You're going to in the Alter Rebbe's telling us how to do it, right?
This is the mechanics within the body.
This is the mechanics. Wow. Wow, wow, wow.
And I mean, it's within the body, the spiritual and physical connection with the body. So or should I say, he's explaining it through the mechanics of the body.
Right. Yeah, very good. Oh my goodness. I don't know how much more we should yeah, we're not gonna really get through this. We should probably stop.
Yeah.
4 pages.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to rush through it.
Yeah, we've already been an hour and a half almost.
I think we do better, with about a half a chapter a week
Yeah,
with the
yeah,
content.
yeah. Alrighty. Well, the love. Okay. So that was pretty
Loving.
powerful. Yeah. So yeah, he doesn't go into the detail much, but basically the Nefesh Elokis, you're going to somehow figure out how to love holiness, love godly things, but because it's love, because it's involves your heart, it's going to not just subdue, but it's going to completely transform the Nefesh Behemoth. Very cool. That is awesome. Did we just, okay, let's hear. Okay, we'll just stop there for tonight then. I want to keep going, but I don't think we should. I'm getting tired and I want to make sure
I'm
that
falling asleep, so please don't go on.
okay, yeah, see, that's what I'm saying too, Dixie. I'm my eyes are getting heavy as well. Okay, well, thank you all for joining. I greatly appreciate it. It was very productive. I just love this class. So thank you all very much for showing up. Mercy, my wife Danielle, Dixie, Russell, and Teresa. Thank you so much for joining tonight.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you, Jane.
Thank you.
Thank you. Be well.
Very uplifting. The whole thing is so uplifting to the soul.
Oh man. Oh man, it really is. Take care, everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Lila Tov.
Mm.